To combat the effects of climate change, the European Parliament is today voting on the so-called nature restoration law. It aims to restore up to 20% of land and sea by 2030. It includes turning some farmland into forests. But many big-scale farmers are mounting a challenge, saying it's not a realistic goal.
On Benjamin Franz's Market Garden farm in East Germany, the focus lies on healthy soil. Here, fruit trees and various crops grow side by side.
There's always one bed and the next bed. And in between, always a little pathway. And it's not a big plot of corn or whatever you can imagine that you see in our landscapes.
It's some of this biodiversity that the European Commission wants to gear towards on bigger farms as part of a bill to stop ecosystem collapse. Its proposal for the EU nature restoration law plans to rehabilitate 20% of the bloc's land and sea areas by 2030. And that includes agricultural lands, which are often degraded. The bill would impose targets on its member states to re-wet peatlands, huge carbon sinks that are sometimes drained for agricultural activities. It would also set goals to diversify landscape features, promote sustainable soil use, and increase pollinators and farmland birds. Franz says he would welcome such targets, but he sees why it would be hard for big farms to implement them.
We've done it here without the law, on our own, and it was a challenge. And if I imagine to do this tenfold or another scale, like it's a job that doesn't give you right away something back.
Europe's largest farmer associations have protested the restoration law. They claim that it would reduce land for agricultural activity and threaten food supplies. But 6,000 scientists have signed an open letter that climate change and the loss of biodiversity are the real threats to food security. The German Farmers Association also says the bill relies on too many bans and doesn't offer enough support.
Cooperative nature conservation means relying on voluntary measures, on incentives, because we have economic restrictions that have to be compensated for.
The European Commission says that there are various funds to help farmers transition to more sustainable farming, and that it is crucial this happen now. The EU's Green Policy Chief Frans Timmermans has said that rejecting the Commission's proposal would put the bloc's entire green agenda at risk. According to him, there's simply no time to draft a new bill to restore ecosystems like these peatlands behind me. For Frans, that would be a welcome change. If the areas surrounding his farm were restored, this would help his crops grow even better.
And with me here in the studio is CW climate reporter Louise Osborne for more on this. Nature restoration, it's a big buzzword, of course, when it comes to the planned European Green Deal. So what exactly are we talking about here?
So they haven't been very specific about exactly what they want to do, but they're looking at trying to improve habitats for biodiversity like plants and animals, bring back larger populations of these animals, particularly reversing the decline of pollinators like bees and insects, for example. They are looking also at protecting areas of urban green space and making sure no more disappears. And one of the most controversial parts of the law is then looking at rewetting of peatlands and restoration of agricultural lands, which farmers see as a threat to their businesses and things.
How about, we saw in that report, we saw a small farm, right? So when we're talking about sustainable agriculture, how can that work now on a large scale? Can it work?
Yeah, it can work. Obviously, a lot of agriculture is based around monocultures at the moment, which is very detrimental to soils and to biodiversity. But there are methods like agroforestry, for example, that brings in trees and bushes into conventional farming. That can be beneficial for the soil. It's also good for creating habitats for biodiversity. There is also rewetting of wetlands, for example, peatlands, which are very important when it comes to absorbing carbon dioxide. Now, a lot of those lands have been drained to use for agriculture, but they can be brought back into this wet, and different crops can be, gotten from them. So reed, for example, moss. So these are the things that can be done. It just needs a lot more education for people to see how it can be developed in that way, and also government support in terms of financing and things.
Let's talk a little bit more about the money. Of course, you know, there's a lot of talk about the economic costs of this law. Talk with us a little bit more about the economic benefits of investing in nature restoration.
So the European Commission has actually put a figure on it. They say for every euro that is invested in restoring land, 8 to 38 euros will come as a return. A lot of this has to do with what are called ecosystem services. So these are things that nature do for us that we don't even think about. You know, cleaning water, cleaning air, for example. Using agroforestry, as I mentioned before, with trees and shrubs in farming can reduce the need for fertilizers. So this saves a lot of money in costs anyway. There's also bees, for example. We talk about pollinators, bees and insects having disappeared. They're very important for pollinating our crops. This is a service that is basically done for free. And by trying to reintroduce and strengthen those populations of pollinators, that can lead to a lot of that work being done without us having to pay for it.
Talk with us a little bit more about the urgency especially with addressing this ecosystem degradation that we've been discussing.
So, I mean, ecosystems in Europe are under a huge amount of pressure. Estimates put 80% of land in Europe as being hugely degraded. This leads to problems. It can, you know, droughts and flooding have made this more difficult. This also means that the flooding, for example, which we are seeing more and more of, is more detrimental to the land, whereas, you know, having trees or shrubs in place could actually prevent some of the worst aspects. So these threaten animal and plant species, but this is something that we can do something about.
Louise Osborne, thank you.